Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Choi, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the difference between a mental material perspective of this world versus the divine truth of being. In this show, we will explore the shift of consciousness, the outer world of sense to the inner world of spirit, when nothing becomes everything, as opposed to everything becomes nothing. Listen as we discuss the benefits of spiritual perception as a practical guide for effective living. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and step out of time into eternity. So I see the title of today's show is When Nothing Lasts Forever. Now, I know we want to talk about the word nothing and also the word forever. So how about getting us started?
Yeah, today we're going to look at that word nothing and how it can mean different things to different perspectives. For example, as we teach here, the oracle found in Delphi, know thyself, nothing in excess, can be seen to mortal sense as anything in moderation, but also to the immortal self as indulgence solely in spiritual truth. So, do I sow to the flesh or do I sow to the spirit? Science tells us underlying matter is energy, and underlying energy is the void or the nothing. To make the statement materially can be interpreted as everything changes and eventually dies, or the 666 in Revelations, eternal imperfection. To translate this spiritually is to see the void or nothing as divine substance, which is forever changeless, perfect, and whole. And I have something here from Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 476, 32-3. Would you read that for us?
Here we are instructed to think differently. Jesus beheld in science the perfect man who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness, and this correct view of man healed the sick. End of quote.
Here we are instructed to think differently. Stop thinking with the corporeal sense mind and start knowing with the Christ mind.
So I'd like to get back to the saying that you said earlier, the know thyself, nothing in excess. As you've said, this is a very concentrated instruction. Could you maybe delve a little further with that for us?
Well, sure. To know yourself, you have to know yourself in the way that you're known by the Creator, which means knowing yourself spiritually. So this is instruction for one who is willing to accept spiritual identity. And then the nothing in excess. To mortal sense, like we said, we interpret that to mean anything in moderation. But that's not what's meant by this. Nothing in excess means only spiritual, only the divine truth, and to live and move and have your being completely enveloped in The omnipresent divine principle is what we're talking about.
So we're looking to have this nothing, this concept of God, the creator, as everything to us. We want that in excess.
Exactly. One being, one life. And then, like what we're talking about here, when nothing is forever. Well, it can be interpreted from material sense by using the testimony of your senses and recognizing, well, really nothing seems to last on the material plane. Even say, for example, the pyramids are changing. 10,000 years ago, they were built, they were brand new. Look at your car, look at your home, look at your physical body. Nothing lasts forever, but it all depends on your perspective. How are you interpreting that word nothing? Because nothing as spiritual, the nothing out of which everything comes, pure consciousness, is forever. It is changeless. It will always be here. It's the only thing that is here.
Now, Swami, let's also discuss in more detail this concept of, do I sow to the spirit or do I sow to the flesh? We may have some readers that maybe not understanding what it is that we're talking about here. What does it look like when we do both?
Well, you can't do both. If you are sowing to the flesh, you believe in the many, you believe in two powers. You're accepting the changing conditions of this personal sense of life. But to sow to the spirit, you can only believe in the one perfect divine being. And it will all depend on which side of the mortal mind are you on. Are you on the side that believes that it is real, or you are on the side that knows there is no other reality besides the one perfect creative principle? And in the light of that divine truth, there cannot be a second self. There can't be something other than the one being.
And so I think I understand that if we are sowing to the spirit, we would not have a concept of duality. Would that be right? Like we wouldn't have like good and bad, good and evil, light and dark, things like that?
Well, you would be walking in the kingdom of heaven on earth. Divine mind only knows divine creation. The divine creation is right here, it's right now, and it's functioning. Changeless, perfect, everywhere, always. It always was, it always will be. But we must be conscious of it in order to activate it in our experience. And before you can become conscious of this divine truth, you have to master the mental material concept and then walk reason through this open door of revelation.
I think that's interesting because that is, I think, exactly what Mary Baker Eddy was saying when she said, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears as to mortals. So he saw through mortal man to see the perfection of being. Would that be correct?
Right. And his consciousness, his conscious awareness of that divine truth externalizes, because consciousness is experience. And just like we learned with quantum physics and von Neumann's chain, the rule remains the same until it is met by something that isn't bound by the same rules. So material law seems superior until it is met by divine law, which is under a completely different government. And it is that divine truth that overrides the material law.
Well, you had said earlier that we have to think differently. Stop thinking with this corporeal mind. So how do we go about doing that?
Well, the idea here is what we call shifts in consciousness. First, you have to learn how to control how you think. You have to build a mental landscape that will support the principle, educating your thought up to spiritual apprehension. And then with practice, you learn to employ techniques like in Kriya Yoga, we employ pranayama, which are breathing and thinking exercises. And then there are stages of this. So pranayama, then pratyahara, sense withdrawal. The divine principle is before thought and it's above corporeal sense. So you learn how to separate your conscious awareness from the influence of the corporeal senses, and you make your mind aware for the presence of the divine creation, functioning everywhere always. But the interesting thing about that is that would appear as nothing in your corporeal sense mind, but it's everything on a spiritual perspective. And then in silence and stillness, you watch, you wait, you listen, and you let divine truth reveal itself to you from within. And when that happens, then you let divine mind take over the scientific government of your body.
So, Swami, I think sometimes we might think that we're letting divine mind influence us, but actually what we're doing is we're actually just thinking that divine mind has an influence on us. How do we know the difference here?
Yeah, by the fruits of the Spirit. There are 3 modes of mortal thought we have to overcome, and we understand that. But divine truth in consciousness resolves things into thoughts and exchanges the objects of sense for the divine idea. So if you are not externalizing divine qualities, peace, love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience, temperance, then you have to know that you're not conscious of the divine truth. And you're probably lost in human imagination, or the collective consensus is still influencing your thought. And you go back to the drawing board, but you don't want to just deny the testimony of your senses. You want to use it to give you clues as to what you're conscious of, how you're thinking.
Now, Swami, you've said before, knowing the divine truth is a lot different than just being optimistic and positive thinking. Can you delve a little bit further for us?
Yeah, no longer judging by the appearance, but seeing the difference between what is unreal and real. If you just work with good and bad, you're still in the realms of duality. And finite good can oftentimes be mistaken for divine fruit. But if you are still under the government of a belief in 2 powers, you're not liberated from material law at that level. So to prevent that problem, you change your line of demarcation from good and bad to unreal and real. No longer judging by the appearance, but seeing the underlying spiritual life. Because becoming conscious of the divine principle and seeing how it is influencing the appearances is what we are starting to experience. By departing from the good and evil world of energy, as Jesus said, I leave this world and go to the Father. We step out of duality into omnipresent truth, which is nothing to the corporeal senses, but it is everything to soul sense, to our 7 spiritual senses.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram, offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes, and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, how would you describe to somebody the definition of God or spirit?
Well, for me, spirit is the changeless state of being, self-existent eternal life, everywhere, always. The divine substance which lasts forever. Maybe we could say nothing is perfect in the same way. What do we mean when we say nothing? Do we see the omnipresent divine principle, or do we see the mental material appearance? What mode of thinking am I in? This opens the door to the personal pronoun I. Is it the mortal personal sense of I, or is it the divine self, impersonal, eternal, absolute, everywhere, always, mystical I? So no longer judging by the appearance, using good and bad as the significator, but judging righteously. Is it real or is it unreal? Will it last forever? Is it changeless? Is it perfect? Is it whole? These become the questions we look at because we have divine mind. It only knows divine truth. And now persons, places, things, we know they didn't come from the divine mind. So we treat them differently. They're intruders, they're imposters, but we don't just deny them. We tell the truth about the lie. We tell the truth about the truth. This is the idea of separating the wheat from the tares. But you'll run into problems if you aren't clear. Like Mary Baker Eddy said, we render the divine law of healing void and obscure when we weigh the human in the same scale as the divine, or limit in any direction of thought the omnipotence and omnipresence of God. This is important instruction if you want to learn how to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty.
We have something here from Bicknell Young Addresses, and I'll read it. The only thing that is certain is life. Get that fact today and make it real. If you don't get anything else, get that. End of the quote. Swami, any thoughts?
Well, the information that is leading to this statement, Bicknell Young also wrote, and I'll read that. Everything you do in your practice must have life in it and must be life. The moment that you begin to understand that principle is life, you are attaining immortality. Principle is changeless, undying perfection. When the entire belief of human or material consciousness is dissolved, the divine structure of spiritual consciousness would remain. It is God. It is from everlasting to everlasting. Spiritual consciousness precedes birth and goes right on after the belief of death. Jesus referred to pre-existence when he said, Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. To be carnally minded is death, and all there is to death is to be carnally minded. Now, he also adds something here from Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health, Key to the Scriptures, page 77, 5-12. Would you read that?
Existence continues to be a belief of corporeal sense until the science of being is reached. Error brings its own self-destruction both here and hereafter, for mortal mind creates its own physical conditions. Death will occur on the next plane of existence as on this until the spiritual understanding of life is reached. Then, and not until then, will it be demonstrated that the second death hath no power.
Then he continues, it is not an exaggeration to say that the great majority of Christian scientists believe in death much more than they believe in life. We have all been so tempted because so far as human existence is concerned, the only thing that seems sure is death. Without science, the whole human race says, as sure as death. And so Christian scientists take that on, and although they do not say it, they think it. The only thing that is certain is life. Get that fact today and make it real. If you don't get anything else, get that. End of quote. This is such an important thing he's telling us here. We're conditioned to conform to this mortal existence. And we don't have leadership telling us you're in the wrong self. Think differently.
Some of you had recited earlier to be carnally minded is death. I believe that's from Paul from the Bible. Is that what you mean when you say that we have to stop thinking?
Well, yeah, where he said, to be carnally minded is death. All there is to death is to be carnally minded. Death isn't a reality. It's not backed by the divine principle. It is a human concept generated by this false sense of existence, driven by a belief in two powers. But it's not the truth. And as the Bible says, know the truth and it makes you free from the belief in mortality, the belief in a temporary sense of existence.
So I have a quote here from Joel Goldsmith. I believe this is from Thunder of Silence. I'll read it. The ultimate of the correct letter of truth is when we go beyond using a word like God to where we are left with nothing but I or I am, and that is enough. I is God. There are not two. End of that quote. So again, he's reminding us you can't have two-ness. There's only oneness.
And the minute you have two, you break the first commandment. You violate spiritual law of the one perfect life. And that's why we have to be able to be monitoring our thoughts and selectively editing what it is we're letting in and knowing the difference between the unreal and the real. Anything that is unreal is now considered the error.
So we have something here from Bicknell Young in Addresses, and I'll read it. When you handle error as a mere secondary expression of the primal error, mortal mind, you are handling it correctly and scientifically. When you permit your thought to be so handled that you believe that you have got to actually contend with some difficulty and that the difficulty has some substance, power, law, or operation, you are not working correctly. Whatever the error is, its only substance is supposition, whether the error be lack, pain, malice, opposition, or whatnot. It has no substance other than supposition, and the supposition has no supposer. The belief has no believer, for the believer is a belief. End of the quote. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, as you drill down with divine science, you start to see collectively we're trying to figure out how the unreal became real. And once you start to open up your thinking and educating your thought up to spiritual apprehension, you really start to see the logic, order, predictability to the divine creation. And when life is held, controlled, and governed by the perfection of being, then spirit is cause and creation is perfect.
Swami, that's a great segue to our next point, and this is going to be from Revelations 21:5. Would you read that?
And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. End of quote. Yeah, this idea of making all things new. When we see things when they're new, they have that feeling that they're gonna last forever, that it's brand new, it's closer to the truth, it's closer to the divine creative principle expressing itself. When things get worn out and no longer work and they're decayed, then we call that getting old. But in truth, nothing is ever born and nothing ever dies. One of the things in Revelation, when you interpret it, you can see the word behold is capitalized. So they're really telling you not to look at this with your mortal sense of perception, but you want to look at this through the soul or through your spiritual senses. And then the other thing is says, and he that said unto me, Write. Writing is reference to this inner dynamic of the joining of spirit with truth, which brings about spiritual light. So learning how to operate your spiritual senses is what we're trying to learn here. And you work both ends to meet the middle. So you can work with the mental material concepts, theories, and at the same time you work with activating spiritual sense in consciousness until the inner and the outer become one and the same.
Swami, I have some writings here. This is from Joel Goldsmith. This is from his The Heart of Mysticism, and I'll read it. There are three major points of the message of the infinite way which must be thoroughly embodied within the consciousness of each student. The first is the nature of God. Each student must change his concepts of God, of his relationship to God, of the function of God in his experience. The second is the nature of prayer. Each must learn the nature of prayer. No prayer that has ever been spoken, read, or heard is sufficient, and so he must attain a much higher concept of prayer. The only true prayer is recognition, acknowledgement, and confidence in the omnipresence of God. The only way to pray is through communion with God, without a single desire, and with no attempt to enlighten, persuade, or influence God. The third point is the nature of error. When you know the nature of God and your relationship to God, and when you know the nature of prayer, you can then see error or evil only as a mirage, an illusion, a nothingness which has been frightening you with an appearance. End of the quote. Swami, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. By knowing the truth, you will dispel the belief in the false sense of life. So you really don't have to try and get rid of anything, that this nothing that supposedly lasts forever disappears in the light of divine truth. Just like light dispels darkness, truth in consciousness dispels the false sense of existence. And what will be left is the kingdom of heaven on earth.
That completes the show for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages as you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you can press that will further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and step out of time into eternity. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.